Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, I'm Joseph Fraganas, filling in for Alan Podcotter, and you're listening to Call Talk for June 26, 2024. Today's topic is Practice on AI, Not Humans, how AI-powered simulation training empowers your human agents to succeed. I want to remind everyone that all of our shows are archived and available to listen to at BenchmarkPortal.com at any time of the day. And now, I would like to introduce the host of Call Talk, Bruce Belfiore.
Thank you, Joseph, and welcome back to Call Talk, everyone. Well, today we'll be talking about AI, a hot topic these days, but with a different twist this time. The ability of AI to empower, not replace humans, is often lost in the sensational stories about AI's impact on contact centers. In this podcast, we're going to explore how conversational and generative AI are being utilized across industries to scale role-playing and enable scenario-based training where agents can practice active listening, communication, and multitasking skills simultaneously. I'll be interviewing David Lawson, co-founder and CEO of Call Simulator, Inc. David has been an entrepreneur focused on technology, data insights, and training for decades. He is the author of Big Good, Philanthropy in the Age of Big Data and Cognitive Computing. He designed one of the first AI for Good applications using IBM Watson, and most recently co-founded Call Simulator, providing conversation training as a service to call centers. He uses a combination of conversational and generative AI to create immersive training experiences. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks for having me, Bruce. It's a pleasure to be on the show with you.
Okay, great. Well, let's get right in with the first question, which I'll throw at you, which is the elephant in the room for all of us. Are human agents going to be replaced by AI?
Not anytime soon. It's really important to understand what AI can and perhaps more importantly can't do. It shouldn't be lost on anyone that McDonald's couldn't trust AI to take our drive-through orders. So there's clearly work to be done. What we are seeing in call centers is AI taking over level one support. While this may seem to take away jobs, what it has actually done is put even more pressure on human agents by taking away the easy calls. Now, when a call comes in, it is likely to have a high level of complexity and urgency, with the added problem of a caller who has had to fight their way through the AI maze to get to a human. So while I definitely see a restructuring of call centers with AI adoption, I also see AI being used to empower, not replace humans.
Okay, good. So, agents are being given so many AI tools in certain centers these days. Certainly it's not all over, but it is growing. And there are many tools, many of these, as I say, powered by AI to help them during a call. Is training still needed with so many tools?
Yeah, and that's definitely one of the traps that we see some call centers falling into. It's both the tools that they're being given during the call, kind of real-time agent assistance, but also the quality. One of the big mistakes that's being made is a classic mistake. Deming must be kind of spinning in his grave because he would always say, quality isn't at the end of the line. It's at the beginning. You build it in, and that's where training is so important. You want to be able to monitor AI, and there's some incredible tools for doing that to mine finished calls, but without the complement of training, well, all you're really measuring is the ineffectiveness of the training. The other thing we have is what I call the 737 MAX problem, which is, when that plane first came out, what Boeing said was, hey, it's so technologically advanced, we don't even need to put you in a training simulator. And of course, that was tragically proven wrong. Now you have to be in a simulator for 2 hours as well as have some classroom pieces. So what I feel in call centers is that this truly amazing technology, and it is really, really good, the things that can help them during a call, it actually demands more training so that they can take advantage of it. Otherwise, the agent is going to be lost. And just like the experienced pilots, were with the 737, it's not going to be because they're not smart. It's just that they weren't exposed to it. So those tools you thought would help them actually end up hindering them.
Right. No, I think that 737 analogy is really, and the fact that you then said, well, they go in for 2 hours of training just goes to show you that, well, the training doesn't mean that it has to go on forever. It doesn't. It can be efficient, but it does have to be sufficient so that the agent really knows what's going on and knows how to leverage the technology that they're being given. Oh, I love that answer. That's great. But let me ask you one other thing, David, and that is that some people will say, why invest in training? Turnover. So this is shifting gears a bit over to another problem, which a lot of call centers have, which is high turnover. Isn't so much of that training wasted?
Yeah, it's been an interesting experience. I've spent my career in data and technology, and actually have done a lot of training in different industries. But these we got started in the 911 space back in 2019, and now we work with all kinds of corporations. But it's really been an interesting learning curve about call centers. And that high turnover can create a sense of, well, what is the value of training, because it's going to be lost. And this is actually always a problem with professional development of any kind in any level of corporation. It's like, well, why should I invest in you? You might leave the company. But here, where you might have 40, 50% turnover, there is a higher likelihood that that's actually going to happen. I'm going to invest, and you're going to go forth and maybe use that training somewhere else or never use it. But here's the reality. When you look at exit interviews, those employees who do quit, maybe right before they get on the floor or right after, that first day or two, about 25 to 30% of them report that the reason that they quit was actually the lack of training. So you put them in this environment, back to what we were just talking about. You give them all these tools, they're having to learn, whatever they're having to do in the call center, your products and terminology, all these different things, and they don't feel prepared. And, humans don't like that. That is the fear response. None of us like to be unsure. We don't want to feel, stupid. We don't want to feel ill-informed. And so 25 to 30% of that turnover is actually caused by not training. So what we believe is if you would invest in training and just move that needle, you would more than make back your investment. But the other thing that training does is it reduces that nesting time. So part of what people do to overcome the fact that the training may not be as effective, they will then nest you. Well, now that's very expensive because you've either got to take a trainer and be next to you or a seasoned call agent. Well, that person isn't taking calls, so they're now a cost. And then the final piece is, what about that poor customer? Why did I have this idea, don't practice on, humans, practice on AI? One of the other things that I've seen in call centers is people put them on the floor, and the practice that they get is actually with actual customers. And I know you've probably been there. I know I have, where I know I've got this trainee who I probably know more than he or she does. That means those initial NPS scores are going to go in the tank.
Yeah, no, a couple of things come to mind here, and I like the concepts of, having the training, because it's going to obviously increase efficiency and proficiency, right? It's going to reduce the nesting time and therefore give a good ROI on that. And it's also going to reduce turnover. When you've got 25 to 30% of people saying one of the reasons they quit is a lack of training. You can actually figure out, and people who are listening to this call right now, in terms of trying to justify training of any kind to their higher ups, should keep this in mind, because the ROI on it can be. By the way, I'll just put in a little parentheses here. I hope that everyone listening knows their cost of. How much does it actually cost your center to lose somebody because of turnover? And if that's something that you'd like to talk to us about, please let me know. And the other thing, David, that I would bring in here is another reason that we've seen from our surveys that people leave is because of their immediate boss. That is to say, their supervisors. That oftentimes, it's an old saw, in fact, that people don't leave jobs, they leave their bosses. That's true in contact centers just as it is anywhere else. And so one of the things to keep in mind when you're thinking about training your agents is also be sure that you train your supervisors and your managers, because sometimes the agents end up with more knowledge on certain technical things because of training, and that's not a good. So I don't know if you have any comment on that before I go on to the next question, David, but I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the ways managers are judged is actually by how adequate was the training. And I am concerned about that. Well, the manager kind of says, well, I bought you all these tools, right? So, back to the 737, hey, I bought you this really technologically advanced aircraft, go off. And I think that's one of the disconnects that happens with the manager. Interestingly, in the role-playing part, which sometimes with the manager, creates another interesting dynamic, which we'll talk a little more about, potentially as we get into simulation training. But yeah, I am well aware that there are other reasons people leave. That's one, pay, pace, all of that. But to me, what begins your relationship with an employee is how you onboard and train them. Mm-hmm. That is what tells that person whether you value them or not. And the more you communicate that you value them, it starts a relationship that can last a long time.
Amen. Okay, I believe in that. That's a very true, very powerful statement. Thank you for that. So you mentioned simulation training, so let's slide over to that now, because you specialized in that, obviously. How effective is simulation training, and what would you like to tell us about it?
Yeah, so simulation training has been proven to be effective in industries as diverse as aviation with flight simulators, the medical field where doctors are able to actually practice doing surgery. In fact, there was a scary stat out there where doctors, a lot of us probably aren't aware, I am because I looked into it, you only have one cadaver per doctor where they can kind of practice doing surgery. So the virtual surgery, obviously you can do as many as you want. It actually reduced first operation errors a couple of 100%. Now, that should give all of us a little pause. One of the reasons you ask your doctor how often have you done this. The same thing's true in aviation. What you're doing is you're reducing mistakes, because what it creates is a safe environment to practice, including failure without the consequences. We're taught that when we're in school and we read about, Thomas Edison and, he failed his way to success. Those are all real things. But what's scary in a call center is, okay, how many failed calls am I going to go through before I start to get my rhythm? And nobody likes that. The customer, gives a bad review. That was awful. You feel bad. But when you're in that simulated environment, you don't have that. And with role play simulation, you're also reducing that need for that human trainer, which again, back to cost, right? Because that's expensive. What's interesting about role play, and probably everybody listening here has done it sometime in their either in their educational world or in their job. There's an element of it because it's your boss or a more experienced colleague that creates a unsafe environment. Believe it or not, people actually report back, I didn't feel that was safe. The other thing that's interesting for role play simulation is this is on a call. When you do role playing live, you're actually simulating public speaking. Well, folks like you and Bruce, we enjoy public speaking, right? But
yep.
95% of people don't. So you're actually putting them into an environment that 95% of the population is not comfortable with, and they might actually be fantastic on the phone. We've all met people who were, you were talking to them on the phone and they were dynamic and you talked about all this stuff, and then you meet them, let's say, at a party and they're over in the corner. So, a lot of introverts actually are terrific in a call center. So the other thing we feel with the whole role play simulation is it gets much closer for them to what they're going to experience in a call center. The other thing that comes up with simulations is, well, it's fake, right? So therefore they'll know it's fake, so they don't take it seriously. What's interesting is, and this, again, been studied in flight simulators, the medical field, knowing it's not real increases a person's ability to learn because their fright and flight reflexes are lowered, and that opens up their mind to learning.
And so that really plays into what you were talking about with the safe concept here. Is that correct? In other words, when people say they didn't feel it was safe, just so that our audience understands that, we're talking about the fact that they're nervous because they feel that they're being judged by their boss during this. Is that correct? Or by the person who is doing the role play? Am I correct on that, or
right.
do I have that wrong?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if it's in a group setting, that judgment gets even wider, right?
Right.
With their fellow trainees. So yes. And when we bring this up, obviously people get defensive because it's not that anyone tries to create an unsafe environment. I want to be clear about that. That's not the point. But that is the perception. I mean, we do a lot of surveys after people use the simulator. This comes up again and again where people are like, it was great to just have this safe environment for me to practice. And most importantly, it's a safe environment, to mess up. I mean, I always tell people when they're learning, new things, I said, you ought to watch like a read through for a play that goes on to be a big hit. The read through is not a hit, right? People are just getting used to this and talking and getting comfortable with the interactions. They need that, and they're going to blow their lines. They're going to encounter something new. One way that simulators are used, by the way, even with experienced people, is let's look at edge cases. So an edge case doesn't happen very often, but you really need to handle that well. We learned that in our work with 911 early on because there are a lot of dispatchers who they never help someone deliver a baby. But then there's some other one that could be their first call. And interestingly, the seasoned people want to practice these edge ones because, say they're 15 years into their career and they're that far away from the training. So in the corporate world, it would just be, again, doesn't happen very often, but when it does, we need you to do these special things. Or maybe it's just handling a kind of caller, a distraught caller or someone just, you're never going to make them happy, that sort of thing.
And, I was thinking, just going back to what you're talking about with regard to the safe environment, making sure that people are comfortable, et cetera, and understanding that there's certain words that when you're talking to your boss, trying to get investment in something, the best. And my thought is that what you're trying to do is optimize the learning environment. Rather than saying I'm trying to create a safe environment, I'm trying to optimize the learning environment, because what I'm doing is putting the agents at ease with regard to what they're doing. They're more open to being able to be trained. And that means that you're optimizing your investment in training, and you're more likely and will, in fact, get a better return on that investment. So that was just a thought I wanted to share.
Oh, I like that, Bruce. I think, how you characterize it's important, but it's also, though, at its heart, what does that learner, that trainee, and it is important in their mind, it actually is safety. While that may be, you want to have other words, and I like that, put them at ease, give them, a comfortable place to learn. Those are all good things. But I think for the people listening, you need to know that you may not mean it, but when you put people in some of these situations, they're not loving it.
Right. And therefore they're not open to it. Yeah, no, very good point, yep. David, very good point. So, well, let's move. So what are your biggest concerns about AI in the call center? Let's sort of jump from where we are to that question.
Well, in the short term, my biggest concern is call centers will just deploy AI without proper guardrails and or use it in ways it's not designed for. There's a lot of hype out there, a lot of energy. Let's go. And look, as somebody who's brought technology to different fields in my decades as an entrepreneur, I love it. Let's move forward. But there are some real issues, and if we are not purposeful in how we deploy it, it's going to lead to stories about AI not working or not being safe, and that will hurt long-term adoption. What I feel is this is a moment for what I like to call smart adoption, which means humans need to bring some common sense to where and how AI is deployed. Early success, even if it's not large in scale, will help guide adoption across the industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So really a lot of exciting things to look for, but also we need to have our antennae up for the concerns. And so in this environment, what are you most excited about as call centers adopt new technologies, including AI?
Well, call centers have so many great use cases for AI, and maybe even more importantly, a rich reservoir of data, which is the lifeblood of AI. Turning that data into insights to impact the entire call center is really exciting. Obviously, that helping agents in a call, right? So while I'm saying let's train them with those things, I am saying let's use those things. I think it's, incredible to, it's hard. I mean, if you think about what an agent's doing, they're having to use their active listening skills, their communication skills, and their multitasking skills simultaneously. That's why scenario-based training is so important, that you're simulating as much of the experience as possible. This ability to coach based on how did the call go, and then linking that coaching back to inform future training. That's something that we're doing more and more, where we actually take our simulation audio and then put it into the same quality systems that they're using for their live calls. And so now you've connected fully your training with the end. One of the things we mentioned, aviation and flight simulators, what a lot of people don't realize about a black box, they always think of it in terms of a crash. And absolutely it's used there. But most of the time, the way a black box is used is actually to say, hey, that was a hard landing, or you did something wrong. Go back in the simulator and practice that. So there never was a crash. Maybe there was almost a crash. That's the beauty, I think, as we start to connect quality and training together, that, we're just at the beginning of realizing that. So that I would say is what I'm most excited about.
Yeah, no, that is exciting, and I like the idea. I didn't know that about black boxes either, and I think that's very interesting that they in fact utilize what's in there as part of sort of normal safety procedures, and they can bring things back to a pilot that can then improve their ability to confront situations and improve their safety. That's great to know, actually. And basically doing the same sorts of things in call centers using technology that we don't call black box, but basically is advanced technology that helps us to do that. So another thing, of course, that's big right now is managing at-home agents. And so how is work from home impacting training?
Well, first, it blew up the classroom, right? Making all training more challenging, and role play training in particular, because now you had to do it over Zoom, over Teams. And we've spoken with executives who are charged with creating a more productive work from home workforce, and being able to provide self-guided on-demand training is high on their list of priorities. So I think that the call centers are going to have to invest more in learning management systems, really ways to have on-demand training, but also, as we were just talking about, linking that training not only to things you want them to do, but perhaps things you need them to work on. Maybe they're not, for instance, showing enough empathy. This is something that comes up a lot of times. I think call centers with the KPIs and the metrics have some things that kind of go against each other. You have lower your average handle time, yet sometimes in order to, for instance, acknowledge or reassure, show empathy, that actually takes a moment. It's one of the things that I see as AI gets more and more adopted in call centers. Ironically, the way you're going to differentiate your brand in the future is going to be by human interaction. Because as more and more interactions become automated, it actually will make human interactions more special. So when you have that human moment, please don't turn your humans into robots. That makes no sense. Give them some space to be human, to say, I'm sorry for your loss. If, let's say, a child's calling in to close an account because their parent passed, or take the moment, hey, I understand your frustration. I'd be frustrated too. Those are moments, and I know they're trying to get some of the bots to do that. It's going to be, I will say, that's going to be a tough cognitive leap for humans to accept that a machine, feels their pain.
Yeah, so really look at those human interaction situations as opportunities to leverage the human connection for your brand, for the good of your contact center and your company. Don't waste the opportunity, seems to be the message there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, David, you wrote about AI's potential for good and bad in your book. We're getting to the bottom of the hour now, or half hour right now. So could you just tell us in the couple minutes remaining, why do you believe the benefits of AI will outweigh the risks?
Yeah, when I wrote this, and that was even prior to generative. It's amazing. That was in 2017. How much has happened just since then? But one of the challenges of implementing AI when there's so many very important ethical considerations is when the good people and the good uses sometimes can hold back because they're like, oh boy, should we? Meanwhile, the bad actors don't care about ethics. They don't have ethics, so they move much faster. So I think what we need to do is, in order for the benefits to outweigh the risk, is I think the AI for good, we've got to have both paths moving as fast as possible. Figuring out, iterating. We're still figuring out how to use this in the best ways and what works now, and some things that don't work today will work, in a year from now. while also figuring out those guardrails and safe ways. And we should have some of these more, ethical things like there is absolute bias in AI. It's not that the AI is evil. In fact, I talk about AI. AI is really kind of a sociopath. It's not, it doesn't care, right? But where the bias comes from is the data that feeds it. And so those are real. But I do feel that AI in the end has such a chance to not only help us on a small scale individually, be our co-pilot, our co-intelligence, but it has a chance to solve some very large issues that might have taken decades that we frankly don't have to solve those problems.
Well, that's great. I think maybe we'll do another one of these, and you'll have the title AI, the Modern World Sociopath. How's that for a title? Now, David, This has been great. You've given us a lot of good content, a lot of good thoughts to chew on here. I really appreciate your coming on to share your thoughts with us. And we're at the end of our time together right now, so I'll turn things over to Joseph. But again, thank you so much for being on our show.
Been a pleasure.
Okay, Joseph, over to you to wrap things up.
Thanks again to David and Bruce today for their insightful discussion. Be sure to join us again next month for another great show, or look at our huge selection of archived shows and topics at BenchmarkPortal.com. Click on Resources and then click on Call Talk, where you will find seasons of the show going back to 2009. From all of us at Benchmark Portal, keep those headsets steady and your fingers ready. This is Joseph Raganas signing out. Have a great day.